Okay, before we get into our operations, we want to do one more thing. We're going to talk about rounding decimal numbers. This comes from section 4.2 of the textbook. Okay, our procedure, just like we did with other rounding, the first thing we want to do is identify the place we are wanting to round to. Now you can see other phrases. For instance, you can see something that says round to 3 decimal places. That's the same thing as rounding to the nearest thousandth. Other phrases that you might see are nearest whole number, which means we want to round to the ones place. Nearest dollar also means to the ones place. Be careful on this one. Make sure you don't put 0.00. When it says nearest dollar, it just wants the whole number. The last one we have is nearest cent. Cent has 2 decimal places, think about money, and this means round to the hundredths place. Now one thing you can do to make this a little bit easier is we want to write a dashed line after the digit in the column from step 1. And I'll talk about why. After that, it's the same thing as before. We're going to look at the digit directly to the right. If it is 5 or more, we round up, so we're going to add 1 to the digit from step 1. And if the digit is less than 5, we round down, or we leave the digit from step 1 the same. The reason that we wrote the dashed line in step 2 is unlike when we were working with whole numbers where we replaced everything with zeros, we are going to discard all of the decimals to the right of the digit that we are rounding to. One thing to note, you must have a digit in the column indicated by what you are rounding to, even if it is a 0. If you're rounding to the nearest hundredth, you need to have something in the hundredths column. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some examples. All right, for example A, we want to round 5.3496 to the nearest tenth. So my digit that is in the tenths column is the 3. I'm going to put a dashed line after it. And the digit that I want to look at is just the 4. Since the 4 is smaller than 5, we're going to round down. So I'm going to leave the 3 the same. We get 5.3. And now all of these digits to the right, we discard instead of writing zeros. So our final answer is 5.3. All right, let's look at example B. We have 0.69738. We want to round to the hundredth. That is a 9. I'm going to put my dashed line after the 9, and I want to look at the 7 now. 7, since it is larger than 5, I want to round up. So 0.69, if I round that up, that is going to be 0.70. Remember that we do want something in the hundredths column, so I do have to include that 0. And then we discard all of the digits to the right. So my final answer is 0.70. Now, even though 0.7 and 0.70 are the same, remember to include the 0. All right, example C. We have 0.01806. We want to round to the thousandth. 8 is in my thousandths column. I'm going to put my dashed line. If we look at the digit to the right of it, we're looking at the 0. 0 is smaller than 5, so we are going to round down. This is 0.018. Remember, we leave the 8 alone, and then we discard all of these digits to the right. So my final answer will be 0.018. All right, example D. We have 57.976. We want to round to the nearest tenth. 9 is in my tenths column. I'm going to put my dashed line. We look at the 7. Since it is bigger than 5, we're going to round up. So we get, instead of adding 1 onto 9, I'm going to add it onto 79. And we get 80. I still have my decimal point. I discard the digits to the right. My final answer is 58.0. Example E, 0.33492. My 4 is in the thousandths column. I'm going to put my dashed line. My 9 tells me to round up. So we get 0.33. We add 1 onto the 4. We get 5. And we discard the digits to the right. All right, a couple more. Example F. My 8 is in the thousandths place. I put my dashed line. My 5 is 5 or more, so we are going to round up. So we get 8.009, and we discard the digits to the right. Example G. My 0 is in the thousandths place. We put our dashed line. My 6 is bigger than 5, so we're going to round up. We get 275.42. We're rounding up, so we're going to change the 0 to a 1. And we discard all of the digits to the right. All right, a couple more. Example H. My 9 is in the hundredths place. I'm going to put my dashed line. My 8 tells me to round up. So I'm going to add 1 onto 89. We get 0.90. And we discard the digits to the right. All right, 2 more. 5.8903 to the hundredth. We have 9 in the hundredths column. Put our dashed line. My 0, since it's less than 5, we're going to round down. So we're going to get 5.8. We leave the 9 alone, and we discard the digits to the right. And last one, 11.0299 to the thousandth. My 9 is in the thousandths place. My other 9 tells me to round up. We're going to add 1 onto 29, so we get 11.030, and we discard the digits to the right. Okay, so that takes care of rounding if we're told a specific value. All right, now the next thing we're going to look at is some money examples. So let's start with the nearest cent. Now, money, you're probably sitting there saying, why would we want more digits than this? Can you have 0.595 cents? No, you can't. And so, but they do still come up. If you think about, if you go by gas, if you look at gasoline prices, I think right now where I am, it's costing like $2 and 0.169. So every 10 gallons, I get to save a penny. And so you do see these. You also see them when you do comparison shopping in the grocery store. If you look at the prices on the shelves, quite often they'll tell you the unit price, or what is it for one, or per ounce, or something like that. And quite often the best buy can be determined by something as small as 1/10 of a cent. And so you do see these out there. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and see what we can do. So rounding to the nearest cent, remember, is we want 2 decimal places, or we want to round to the nearest hundredth. So here, we're always going to go to our second decimal place. My 9 is in my cent column. And just like before, I'm going to include my little dashed line. If we look at the digit to the right, we have a 5, which tells me I want to round up. So I get $14, and add 1 onto 59, we get 60 cents. And again, we discard all the digits to the right. All right, example B. My 4 is in my cents column. I'm going to put my dashed line. And if we round this, I want to round up, so I get 0.8. 4 becomes a 5, and we discard the digits to the right. All right, example C. $578.0663. If I want to write this with to the nearest cent, my 6 is in the cents column. The digit to the right is bigger than 5, so we're going to round up. We get $578. 0.0, we add 1 to the 6, it becomes a 7. And last one, my digit in the cents column is the 5. We put our dashed line. If we look at the digit to the right, it is a 4. Since it is less than 5, we round down, so we're going to leave the 5 the same and then discard all of these other digits. All right, that takes care of rounding to the nearest cent, so now let's try some dollars. So remember, for this we want to round to the nearest whole number, meaning I don't want anything after the decimal place. Even if you put 0.00, that's saying to the nearest cent. That is $29.00, and that's not what I want. I just want dollars. So for instance, on this one, example A, we are rounding to the nearest whole number. I have a 9 in my dollar column. Just like before, we're going to go ahead and put our dashed line. We look at the digit to the right, it is a 1, which is less than 5. So we are going to round down. We're going to leave the 9 the same, and we get $29. No decimals. All right, example B. We have a 0 in our ones column. The 9 tells me to round up. We get 9, 9. The 0 becomes a 1, and we discard everything to the right. All right, example C. We have a 9 in the ones column. 8 tells me to round up. And so this one is kind of tricky. We actually want to add 1 onto the whole number. If we add 1 onto 5,999, we get 6,000. So remember, if you have to go over until you can actually add 1 onto it. And last one, 55 cents to the nearest dollar. My 0 is in the dollars column. I look at the digit to the right. Since it is 5 or more, I can round up. We add 1 onto 0, and we discard all the decimals. So this is about $1. Okay. Now, in this section, in this module, we're going to be using rounding in 2 instances. The first one is we can still use rounding to estimate. And remember, estimate means round the numbers, then perform the operation. Now, when we get into dividing decimals, we're going to see the other option, which is round your answer, which means you're going to do the computations, and then you're going to round the answer. So we will be playing around with this more as we progress through the section. All right, that takes care of this section. Go ahead, do the homework, and I will see you again shortly.